Well, welcome to this presentation by AI in New Jersey entitled Design, Clients, and Process, Common Issues in Practice from Across the Pond, UK and the US. You see on the first slide here, our speakers are listed. We will be introducing them as we go forward. But just so you know who's talking to you now, my name is William J. Martin. I am an architect in the US in New Jersey. Stacy, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, we have a little bit of housekeeping that we have to go through, so I'm going to go through that now. This course is an AIA CES approved course for 1.5 learning units, HSW. Credits earned on completion will be reported to the AIA Continuing Education for AIA members. Certificates of completion for both AIA members and non-AIA members are available upon request. This course is registered with AIA CES for continuing professional education. As such, it does not include content that may be deemed or construed to be an approval or an endorsement by the AIA of any material of construction or any manner of method or manner of handling, using, distributing, or dealing with any material or product. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay. Course description, design, clients, and process, common issues in practice from across the pond, UK and US. I'm going to paraphrase some of this so we can get to our program itself. This is a panel discussion, is facilitated by two small firm practitioners, one AIA member from the US and one RIBA member from the UK. Together with 4 additional colleagues with similar sized practices, we will compare and contrast the industry and the profession on both sides of the Atlantic. And there are some differences, and it'll lead to some interesting conversations. The body of the program will provide actual project examples, public, private, residential, commercial, and we'll have questions from the moderators to the guests, to our panelists. The moderators will also answer a question as well. And then our audience will be able to, once we complete that, our audience will be able to ask questions through the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of the screen when you move your cursor onto the screen. This course is best suited to small and mid-sized firm principals and project managers. Those staff and other levels will likely find value in the content as well, and I hope a little bit of humor as well. AIA CE topics included in this program are practice management, project planning, design, and construction. Stacy, can we have the next slide? Okay. As with all our continuing education, we have learning objectives. I'm not going to read them all, but they are safety. Next is welfare, health, and at the bottom, number 4, attendees of this program will learn the commonalities and contrasts between the practice of architecture and the construction industry in the US and UK, presented through the experiences of our 6 panelists. So we're here to achieve these learning objectives as we answer these questions and compare from each side of the Atlantic. Stacy, can I have the next slide, please? Okay. The American Institute of Architects and its members are committed to the highest ethical standards and full compliance with all laws and regulations, including federal and state antitrust laws. And by complying with both the letter and the spirit of antitrust laws, we protect the integrity of our professions and the reputation of the AIA. Now, that concludes the paperwork, the business of the program. So now we're going to move on to introductions, and my co-moderator, Scott Masker, is going to begin.
Hi, everybody. It's really great to be here. So I'm just going to, at the moment, introduce quickly myself and then my other UK colleagues. So I'm Scott Masker. I currently run a very small practice here. My colleagues, Natalie Skeet of Forest Architecture, and Rob Jackson of 527 Architects are both founding directors of their practices. And all three of us have come from larger practices in the past where we've had a lot of experience with different building types of all kinds. And I just wanted to add, we're very fortunate here in our region in England in that we have so many really good and professionally active and interested practices in the area that it gives us a lot of chance to collaborate and actually, you know, talk kind of face to face on many occasions about all our current challenges in the industry. So we find that very useful. It also raises the bar for us too, because we're constantly seeing our competitors work, if you will, and you know, it's good to have that kind of edginess to the general diaspora here. So that's just a quick introduction to the three of us. And Bill, you're going to do
Yes,
your...
well, I want to, yeah, Stacy is advancing the slides.
Yeah.
We're not reading the bios, but we want the slides to come up because we are recording this program and we hope to have it available on YouTube at a later time. So we wanted people who are interested in the bios to be able to stop the video and be able to read them. So Stacy's flipping through those bios. Okay, and now we come to our US participants. My name is William J. Martin. I am also a sole practitioner running a small firm. I used to do larger buildings. I used to have employees. I no longer do. I find that I prefer the craft of creating smaller projects. It allows me to get into more detailed, and which is what I most enjoy about being an architect. I also have with me two participants from New Jersey in the US, and let's advance the slide. There we go. Kimberly Bunn, AIA, is also a small practitioner architect. She does historic preservation and other types of things. And there's her bio. And we now go to advance this. There we go. Marissa Iamello, AIA, who is also a small firm practitioner from New Jersey, and her firm is in Ocean, New Jersey. And there is Marissa's bio. And you should be able to see all of us for those in attendance. Okay, Stacy, I believe that's the end of the PowerPoint, correct? Okay. All right. Next, my co-moderator, Scott Masker, is going to say a few words about how we're going to conduct this program. And Scott, why don't you pick it up from there?
Thanks. So the first thing I wanted to say was, for everybody's benefit, is how Bill and I came up with this idea. And basically, since I've been going back and forth to the States, we've been having lots of conversations about our practices and how we work and the things that we're concerned with and the experience we share in common. And our take on this is essentially made up of the idea that, you know, architecture is a service and not some self-serving art form for an individual's aesthetic whims. That, you know, there's a responsibility to see that things are made well and that the building, of course, that's what we're usually asked to design as a building, arrives from the brief and opportunities of the place. And the result is environmentally responsible, soundly constructed and efficient, and hopefully then pleasing aesthetically. Additionally, I've been impressed along the same lines with the vlogs on YouTube of Eric Reinholdt from a 30 by 40 studio, where he covers these aspects of what and how architecture is practiced. And I think he does it rather selflessly and without kind of promoting a particular stylistic hubris. In the end, the main thread of emphasis here being that we are stewards and custodians of an art form that is historical, it has precedence and comes from example, which we stand our new work against. That is a process, and it's a profession, and it's a service, as I've mentioned before, through which we can make things better for people. Again, emphasis on people, because they are who we're making these spaces for, and in a very practical and immediate way. And today, of course, this has a resonance right through to helping deal with the environmental crisis, which we'll talk about later in some of the questions, I'm sure, and where we can assist through cajoling clients to make good decisions, and on the multifarious aspects and elements of projects, such as on materials and energy efficiency. And during the course of our discussions this evening, we might also share how we are all coping with the changing world at the tail end of the pandemic. In organizing this, we specifically look to small practices, as we've mentioned earlier, to make the discussion more approachable and as relevant as possible for all of those participating this evening. As many of us are home working in their bubbles, it may be good to have some insight as to how we're all dealing with communication and relationships and decentralized collaboration, and how this contrasts with the old world of the studio-based model, where the team might all be sitting together more frequently every day. So in terms of conducting this, we're going to start with asking each pair of practitioners a set question, and which they'll answer. Then there's an opportunity for Bill and I to cut in a bit, and then for you, other participants, to through the Q&A button to ask some questions. And then subsequent to these three set questions, we'll then open the discussion to more general questions and anything that anybody else would like to ask at the time. So
Okay.
So there's that.
Okay, so attendees that have questions, we're going to have a couple of, as Scott explained, we're going to have a couple of set questions to start the ball rolling. But if you have questions, use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen when you hit your cursor, just so we know. All right, now, I guess we'll move to our first question, Scott, right? We
Yes.
decided that we would take the first question, you and I.
Yes, so Bill and I, we figured we'd take a little bit of responsibility here and try to deal with the first thing. Very general question. So it's basically, how is it for you since March 2020? What are the current opportunities and challenges that we're facing?
Okay, let's talk a little bit about what happened over the last 18 months. I still remember here in the US, it was, at least in New Jersey, it was March the 16th of 2020, it was a Monday, and we were locked down. We weren't supposed to go anywhere or do anything, and until they had figured out what the government was going to do in order to help address this issue. And in the beginning, there was a lot of fear. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know, when we would be able to get back to our offices. This remote working started with the use of technology like the Zoom conferences. And so, we were kind of thrust into the cyber world of Zoom, which helped alleviate some of the fears. But one of the things that I noticed right away was that some of my clients, especially potential clients, weren't really comfortable with the Zoom technology. It's nice you can see someone, you can have a conversation, but it doesn't really take the place of being there in person. And of course, we couldn't be there in person. So I had some clients that were not happy with the Zoom conference type setup, and some that were. About a month after the lockdown, our governor here in the state of New Jersey redefined what was allowed to occur. They had had a month of watching what was going on, and they decided that construction that had already been given building permits, that was already underway, could continue. So that meant that architects on projects that were under construction were essentially back to work at that point, which was great. But I remember going to a site meeting with the contractor, and I looked like I was preparing for surgery. I had my N95 mask on, I had my glasses on, I put a hat on. I mean, I had gloves on. I mean, you could barely move. But we worked through those site meetings and such, and gradually got used to this new normal of the Zoom conference, and looking like a hazardous waste cleaner when you were out on site. I did find it absolutely fascinating, though. The first meeting I did go to when we were allowed back, our profession was allowed back out, was I got on the Garden State Parkway, which is a major highway here in New Jersey. It runs from the north of the state to the south. There was no one else on the road. There were no other cars. I looked in front of me on either side of the road. I looked in the rearview mirror. There was no one on the road. It was very spooky. So I wonder, Scott, what's been your experience with the last 18 months?
So what happened then was quite interesting, because although it made us ask a lot of questions in the office, and at the time I was still with my other concern, we had 30 people to look after. And we were wondering, what's going to happen with the work environment. But as far as the sites were concerned, everything was just carried on. I mean, the smaller construction sites they didn't seem to miss a beat. There was some question on some of the larger London sites where there were many, many more people working, about how they manage the issues there. But more pointedly, I think the whole thing became a catalyst for asking us how we actually work generally, and what the potential was, for that. And I think with a lot of other industries, learning how to work from home and understanding things about office working that aren't really necessary. We've accepted a certain status quo about how people work, and then even more importantly, I think it also became a lever for people to rethink things, like myself and my colleagues at the time, about what the business really wants to do. And I know a number of other similarly mature practitioners who also broke with their existing practices and went off to do different things. So they may or may not have been doing that anyway, but it did become an environment where people say, well, actually, why am I doing this, and why am I doing it this way, and can I do it differently, better, etc. And I think we have learned a lot of ways of doing things better, and it has pushed us to, I'm currently collaborating with any number of other architects who are helping me with my workload. So that's quite interesting. And people's willingness to want to do that is phenomenal. And of course, being who we are, we're really concerned about the quality of work, whether it's your own or you're doing it for somebody else. You get a really high standard of return on that collaboration. So that's quite quite uplifting to see that. So yeah.
How do you like the Zoom, the technology? What do you think about it?
I think it's great. I mean, it actually works very well, reducing travel time, and everybody can be a lot more efficient. I suppose, as you say, once we all got used to it, and people kind of understood how to use it. Yeah, I'm not a great fan of those fake backgrounds, because people's heads disappear into the graphics. But
full disclosure, this is my messy studio behind me.
Exactly.
It's not fake. I couldn't make this up if I tried.
Yeah.
Did you have any clients refuse to use the technology?
No. Again, I don't think and for me at the time, so we had, I mean, we were using it more in-house to keep everybody organized, you know, at the time, but we didn't really have that issue with clients. I think they're all quite, you know, able.
Oh no, I had a couple of clients who they had no fear at all. But the strange thing about this on our side of the ocean here is that there were quite a few people who seemingly had no fear at all and just wanted to move forward as if things were normal. And then there were others that were absolutely terrified and wouldn't come out, and wouldn't touch anything, it wouldn't do anything. And trying to cope with that, I mean, you know, that's not unique to this profession, but we were all trying to cope with that for the first couple of months. Yeah. But I was actually very surprised when a client say to me, you know, I'm not satisfied with, you know, seeing you through the computer. I want you at my house. And I was like, I can't do that. The governor will get upset with me.
Yeah.
You know, oh, well, we'll go and we'll meet in the front yard.
I suppose the speed of communication is with in terms of getting the work done. I think that quite concerns me, and that you don't have your colleagues right next to you, and those discussions over the drawing board, I think are being missed now, importantly. So although the collaboration is working out fine, because I'm working with actually quite seasoned architects, you know, purposefully, so I don't have to worry about instructing people in a certain way. But you do miss those kind of little exchanges where, oh, what if you did it that way? And why don't you try this? Do a quick sketch. Let's see what that looks like, you know. And when you're not there observing what your colleague's doing necessarily, and you just have that little peek over the drawing board, it makes it much more difficult. So you have to react in a quite a different way.
Just to finish up on this question, did you or do you have any clients that are asking specifically for technologies to address air quality and COVID related and cleanliness? Are you incorporating any of that? Is it, you getting requests for that?
I'm not. I think we should ask other people though, because my work's mainly domestic. So at the moment, so there hasn't been any requirements for that at all, actually.
I have been, I do a lot of high performance residential, and I've been getting clients asking me about, you know, ambulatory within the house, circular hallways so that you don't have to pass people, even in the same family. Wow. Some families have extended generations in the family, and they're worried. Large laundry rooms with extra ventilation, where you have a dirty side and a clean side to the laundry room. Things like that. Touchless entry hardware for doors, even in single family homes. I noticed that people are starting to, well, we're 18, 19 months into this, you know, people are really thinking about this, and I'm getting some really good questions, and, you know, and trying to incorporate these things into my work. So I think that pretty much concludes the first question. Do you want to, Scott, would you like to ask the second question? I think we're going to Natalie and Kimberly next.
That's right. So so now we're very fortunate here to have practitioners who are kind of versed in historic buildings. So for Natalie and Kimberly, how significant are historic building and preservation projects in your work? And what are the different issues you face in tackling these? Very broad. So
hi, Natalie, why don't you start?
Okay, I'll start. Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so thank you very much for the introduction. And if anyone has any burning questions, then please add them into the Q&A box, and I'll answer at the end.
A little louder, Natalie, please.
Can you hear me?
A little louder. Yeah.
Okay, I'll shout.
Okay.
So in our practice, we love old buildings, the textures, the craftsmanship, the quality and use of materials, and the quirkiness. We love the unexpected, which often comes with historic buildings: a secret doorway, a private staircase, interesting ironmongery. Historic buildings and conservation areas probably account for about 70% of the work in our practice, mostly masonry buildings, but not wholly. They are significant for us because, one, we like to help protect them for future use, and two, we enjoy adding something contemporary alongside of them. We love a contemporary twist, whether that requires us to create an internal environment that is unexpected or to introduce a contrasting material to what is found within the original building, much like this project of ours, where we built a photography studio using the historic garden walls as the building's outer skin. We are also positioned in quite a strategic location geographically. We have a lot of old buildings on our doorstep. Many are nationally listed and some are locally listed. And these are the ones I'm going to talk to you about this evening. So I'll briefly describe just 7 issues we come across in such buildings all the time. And these typically stem from the design process itself. So number 1 issue, clients. Our domestic clients often have wild, expensive and fanciful ideas about what they wish to do with their properties. But do they understand the issues and limitations that come with a project that is an older property? Often they don't understand what is at stake or the lengthy process ahead of them. So we find ourselves holding their hands and spending much of our time managing their expectations. It is a case of having to educate them about the potential obstacles and subtly keeping their feet firmly on the ground. Number 2, the non-designated heritage asset. As I mentioned before, in the UK, we have nationally listed buildings. These can be found on a publicly accessible register and are noted for their conservation significance. They also have a graded preservation status, grade 1, grade 2 star, or grade 2. If an owner of a listed building approaches us for a project, we know what to expect further along down in the design process. However, we also have the non-designated heritage asset, otherwise known as a locally listed building. These are buildings that are not regulated. There isn't a go-to register where you can find them listed out, and how they arrive with that status is often pretty subjective itself. Sometimes someone may feel a particular site is significant and then drive support from others within their local community to get that building or site recognised. But generally, where I'm based, driven by our local community. One of our biggest issues that we find within our domestic projects in particular is that clients often have no idea they have purchased a property with that status, or the limitations that that can bring. So that leads us nicely onto our 3rd issue, and probably the biggest issue, planning permission. So I understand from talking to our American friends that we have a pretty onerous planning process here in the UK. I won't delve into this too much, but this diagram explains the process. And in brief, if you wish to make a significant change to a building, we have to submit proposals to a local government team for approval. For the sake of this presentation, we will just call them the planners. Within our practice—
Natalie, can I interrupt you for 1 second? Your process for dealing with historic preservation seems to be very different from the way it is here. Just so that I understand you, the historic properties are designated at the government level, at the highest level. Is that right? Or is it more local?
Some of them are, and then some of them are a little bit more subjective. So it might be a historic building, but it's not necessarily on a particular register to say that you can find that particular building. Sometimes we find that out further along down the design process that they are significant.
Okay, so the designation is done at a larger level, at a country level, so to speak, and then there's a local level, and then there are planners that specifically you have to deal with as you manage the project that your client hires you to do. Is that right?
Whether it's the designated ones or the non-designated ones, that's correct.
Okay, I'm hoping Kim will go into the contrast here, but I just wanted to bring that up so that our American attendees would understand that that's a significant difference. Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Why don't you continue with your process?
That's fine. So within our practice, we present almost every project to the planners via a service called a pre-app assessment or a pre-application assessment. This is where the planners can analyse a proposal against their local and national policies. and raise any issues or concerns they have via written feedback. However, this is also the point where they confirm a historic building is locally listed. By this point, we may well have arrived at the bones of a beautiful scheme, only to find out we can no longer progress with that design. So we end up with our fourth issue, changes to a client's brief. On hearing a property has a locally listed status, clients' big project ambitions will get diluted down. This can sometimes mean we have to go back to the drawing board if the planners are unlikely to support our initial proposal. However, if we get to this scenario, we need to consider if we have built in enough fee and time for revising the scheme and potentially going through that process again. Issue number 5, planning conditions. So once we get through the formal application process or the main application to seek planning approval, the approved project comes with a series of conditions outlining what we need to conform to, such as the use of particular materials. Conditions can be incredibly onerous and time-consuming. They can also be quite demanding financially, which clients may not necessarily have anticipated. And from our perspective as architects, conditions may require us to produce a lot more information than we had originally planned for. So again, we need to allow for this within our fees, because working through those conditions can eat up a lot of our time. Issue number 6, conservation conflicts. Beyond the realms of planning and onto our construction information stage, conflicts can often occur between maintaining the aesthetic value of a historic building and satisfying another statutory process, which we call building regulations approval. This process certifies that the construction is fit for purpose and the building can safely be occupied by its end users. A conflict example is this project, the Banana Store, which was originally built as a printing workshop and had lovely large windows to flood the internal spaces with lots of natural light. The building became a store for fruit and vegetables over a 30-year period and fell into disrepair. Our job was to convert it to a dwelling, which means we had all of the issues to deal with to satisfy building regulations approval. This includes emergency routes out of the building and the potential for someone to jump out of an upper floor window. So do you retain the original single glazed fixed windows for their aesthetic value, or do you replace them to ensure that the building's occupants can escape safely if they had to? Which one takes priority? How do you decide if conservation values should take precedence? In the end, some level of common sense and perhaps compromise must play a part in our decision making. On this occasion, we convinced the conservation officer, a conservation decision maker who is a planner, to prioritise occupant safety over conservation integrity. And finally, there is issue number 7. When construction on a historic building gets underway and the contractor starts to poke around, they can be presented by one unending can of worms. We cannot guarantee what we will find in such buildings, because often these properties either haven't been touched for a very long time or maybe not at all. This can mean we have to produce further information for the contractor, which we may not have necessarily have previously agreed to. So the amount of information we agreed can naturally increase. So these are just some of the issues we face with our historic building projects, and believe me, there are more. But once you're on the other side, they can be incredibly rewarding projects to work on. Thank you very much.
That was fascinating, and there's a lot to digest there, and the process is different for sure. Kim, what's your experience in historic preservation and building projects in terms of the regulatory issues?
Definitely, we're much different here in the States from the standpoint of, yes, we do have a National Historic Register where things can get listed, but there's really a small portion of buildings that are actually listed on that. And obviously our history is a little shorter. We're kind of, especially on the East Coast, dealing from things that are mid 1700s to obviously current. And there's a lot of work to get a building nationally listed, but it doesn't protect the building. Even if it gets on the historic register, does not mean that it's completely protected from changes, from demolition. And in the States, we are much more locally controlled. So every town that you're in New Jersey has different regulations and different things to deal with from a historic property. So first you have to go to, all right, what's my local town that I'm in? Is it in a local historic district? Is it historically listed either on a state level or on a national level? And if it is on a national level, is there anything specific that is called out in the building? Because we've had some buildings called out for their stonework or for other things. So, you know, first it's, you get a project, you have a client come to you, and it's the research of where is the building? And then we also have the local zoning and ordinances that kind of pair with historic preservation. And depending on your town, historic preservation can take the precedence, or the regular zoning and codes could take the precedence, and historic really isn't that important. So again, in the state of New Jersey alone, we have hundreds of different municipalities. I'm personally licensed in Pennsylvania, so I do stuff along the Delaware River across, and each one of those municipalities is completely different also. And as you go across the country, again, everything kind of varies with the local mandates and the local town. So you don't have a process where you can go to a single planner. A lot of our towns do have planners, have zoning officers that you can work with, but really the start of our projects is working with those clients of, all right, what do you even need to do? 90% of my personal work is residential. I do some commercial, but 90% of it is residential. So again, here in the States, when you're doing residential, you really have a lot of the homeowner and the contractor that have control. And I actually do just have kind of a general, and just from an overall perspective, residentially, you could see we're dealing with brick, stucco, different details. So you're working with the owner of, all right, what do you even want to do? What do you want? Do you want to add? Do you want to change? Do you want to restore? Because we go into buildings where sometimes you don't even want to walk in the building because it's structurally so bad. And other buildings are absolutely wonderful. You can see this one down here actually had holes in the roof, and all of the ceiling joists were completely ruined from years of water, termite. So one of the next steps is, okay, what are we doing to the project? And then who do we have that can come in and help us with it? So then contractor is the next big step before we even get to the town, because we have to set what is the whole scope of what we're going to do and what is the workmanship. You know, again, this old stonework developed over 200 years and was added to and changed on a local property where you could see it's a barn. But then we had other ones where this one, what up here was very interesting, because the method of stucco construction is something we can't do and we can't match. So with the owner, the discussion and the contractor was, all right, whatever changes you want to make, we can't affect the old stucco walls because we cannot match them. So if we're going to do that and we can't match it, how do we protect those things? So we develop the scope. Then we go and talk to the town, and there's multiple levels of town discussions once we're there. You have to go through the general zoning. Then if there is a historic preservation commission, which some towns do have, and they have specific requirements that how do you match to stone and stucco and different materials and the things that we can't get today, because that is one thing that we come across on these smaller projects. We can't even get the material or the craftsmen that are able to do it anymore. Thankfully, we are in an area where we're outside. Where I'm in South Jersey, we have Philadelphia that's 15 minutes away. A lot of older building stock is there. So thankfully, when they demolish them, there are places that go in and salvage. So we can go in and we can get wood flooring. We can get a lot of old moldings that you can't get today. Or we have to go to a woodworker and have them actually cut. If you are in an area where it is historically listed, it is on a register, and you do have a commission, sometimes there's an additional approval process with them. So we do go through in the similar type of things that they might come back with conditions and changes to what your design and what the client wants to do. And then I think, you know, just like Natalie said, the last part is actually, you've got all your permits, you've got all your approvals, you get into construction, they open up, there's something completely unexpected, or they come up to a challenge that then during the job, there are more changes. So then sometimes we have to go back to that historic preservation board and say, okay, we have a change, looking at different, you know, windows and how profiles match up. I felt like one job, we actually had a window studio in the building because we brought 9 different manufacturers of windows to match up to the existing to see what worked best, to look at thermal value and other things. And in the end, the old windows weren't changed. We only did new windows in newer areas. The old windows, we brought in a contractor who actually deglazed them on site, reglazed them, put a film on for better thermal value, because we could not get a new window to match the profiles. They were so unique. So these are like some challenges that we definitely see on different buildings. And then throw budget in, and then we all know what budget does to our projects.
So it seems that the big contrast here is that in the UK, it's more of a government controlled process, and Natalie is dealing with government employed planners that then review her architecture and then either approve, or Natalie, do they make suggestions to you?
Yeah, so this is the good thing about having the pre-app assessment process, that it starts a dialogue with them. So we table our initial proposals, and then they come back to us and they will flag any sort of issues that they thought or things that we've got to work through, and they may suggest that we send them a sketch, a revised sketch for something. But what's great about that is it starts a working relationship with them. So it's not a straight, you know, no. It just, we've got to work through it in order to get to where we need to get to.
Yeah, I think having that conversation with the Conservation Office particularly is really important. But the other big difference here that I think we should all note is you can actually go to jail for altering a listed building without permission. I mean, if it was really bad, I've really not kind of heard of it, or they may make you put the work back and fix it to the way it was if it was unauthorized as well. So those are quite interesting areas to get into. And the other point about sometimes our clients don't hire us to do the contract administration or keep us on board during construction. They might get a builder and they might get on with the work. So they might be taking a risk because this guy is doing stuff. No one's controlling what they're doing. So if there are brick walls that are supposed to be built in a certain way with a particular mortar and, you know, salvage bricks or something like that, or reuse bricks from the site, they might not be doing that. And, you know, it could be very risky for the client, and they don't realize that. So trying to make the client understand why it's important to have a professional on board to, in a sense, look after them, it can be quite difficult, especially when, as Kim was saying, they're dealing with all the other budgetary issues. You know, do I spend money on that guy, or do I spend my resources on the building to get what we want out of it?
Yeah, jail is a big issue.
Yeah.
It's a big difference.
We don't have that here.
We don't do that here unless it's really egregious. But the contrast in the US, I mean, we have the National Register, as Kim said. We also have the State Historic Preservation Office, which we call SHPO. And then we have local commissions, which are really the ones that we present to, right, Kim? It's the local commission that really controls all of what can happen or can't happen. It doesn't happen at the state level or higher. It happens at the absolute local level. And if a building is not protected, here's a big difference. If a building is not protected at the local level, even if it's listed on the state register or on the national register, the owner can demolish it. There's no restriction on demolishing it unless it's protected at the local level. So the local residents of the town or the region that's being protected have a lot of skin in this game. They have to want to protect their history. They have to want to do that. Kim, have you?
Interesting here as well. They can list a building while you're working on it, which I've had happen in the middle of a process. They've decided to list this barn we were converting. So then that meant that we were going for the approvals, and during the whole process, we had to then submit a whole range of additional information to, kind of construction level, where we were dealing with something more diagrammatically. And then they listed it, which raised the bar in terms of the information and how they approved that proposal. So that was quite interesting.
Oh boy. Kim, the local historic preservation boards are enabled by local ordinances, but they are populated by essentially lay people with some training. Have you got any good stories about that process?
I think most of the local members of the Historic Preservation Commission, there are some architects and engineers and people that are more experienced on them, but then yes, you do have just normal townspeople, but most of them have an affinity for the historic buildings. And again, they find themselves to be stewards themselves. So normally they're pretty open to discussion. And if they don't know something, we can explain it to them. So I don't have any stories of where it's been a bad process. It's just a process and the back and forth.
Okay. Scott, why don't we move on to the next question and get
Bill, Bill, we have a question on this topic before you move on. The question, why is it that our domestic policies concerning historic structures are not coordinated in a more holistic way so that we could ensure that much of our valuable historic architecture can actually be preserved?
Tim?
Yeah, who wants to take that one? Well, unfortunately or fortunately, in the United States, we're definitely much more home controlled. So again, everyone feels an affinity for their local town, their local buildings, their local state, and they feel that they are a better steward of what needs to be protected, as opposed to somebody across the country, somebody, in government. So I think that here we've always had much more local, regional, municipal control on these things. And I think just like any other discussion we see, the local people who have that affinity do not want to give that up. And there has been discussion of trying to do some, joint ordinances. But then the problem is, well, my town has this and my town has that, and my town's history is linked to X, Y, Z. And they normally collapse in discussions and never move forward, unfortunately.
Natalie, do you have anything to add to that?
Can I jump in a second? So I
Sure,
think
Go ahead.
I think, as Natalie's explained, I think there's when a planning application's made, it's to a local planning officer, and quite often they've got a conservation officer, and I think Natalie touched on that, who tends to kind of put the conservation case forward, and a planning officer will kind of balance the benefit of what you want to do against historic concerns and against a whole raft of other kind of consultants' concerns. So that's the kind of the local level. The conservation officer is quite often based in sort of local government and knows that area really well. They also, if it's a nationally listed building, as Natalie was describing, the sort of grade 1, grade 2 style, grade 2 listed buildings, that you'll quite often have the local government consult with Historic England, and a Historic England officer will give you their opinion of what they think about the project. And quite often the local conservation officers just fall in line with whatever Historic England says, because that carries a lot more weight. So it tends to be with Historic England and analysing buildings, there's kind of quite a detailed way of assessing the value of historic buildings in terms of whether it's aesthetic value, whether it's historic value, whether it's a value about meaning. What is the value of the building? Why are we trying to preserve it? And then you quite often get into quite a long discussion about what do we want to change? What does that change about the building? So does that change how you read the previous uses of the building, how it's kind of interpreted going forward? Is that what's really important with the building, or are there other elements of value within it? And quite often you can get into sort of quite detailed conversations with them about the history of that building and what the actual value is and why it has been listed at a certain level.
Natalie, you were going to add something there, were you?
No, that's absolutely fine, Bob's hit the nail.
Sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. Stacy, why don't we hold the rest of the questions till we get through this second question so we can get our other two panelists more engaged.
Okay,
Scott,
no
why don't you?
Yeah. So Marissa and Rob, so what's your experience with including sustainable design in your projects? And are your clients embracing or resisting sustainable design features, and why? Want to go first, Marissa?
Okay. So sorry. So right now I do mostly residential, but I've worked at larger firms, and when I worked at larger firms, the larger scale projects almost always had some sort of sustainable component to them. So for example, I worked on a lot of schools, and a lot of the schools tried to achieve at least the LEED Silver when we were working on them. Now that I work on mostly residential, the majority of my clients don't really come to me with sustainability at the forefront of their minds. However, in the past year, I've had one project where the clients are very concerned about how their house has a carbon impact. So they are trying to do a net zero house or a passive house. So I'm going to actually share my screen with you. Okay. So this is the house that I'm working on in Bradley Beach, New Jersey, which is a small beach town, and it's on an undersized lot. So there are some issues because we're trying to get variances to get this project to move forward. But some of the things that we're trying to incorporate are high performance envelope. We're using super insulated walls and roofs, airtight construction, high performance windows, sustainable materials like fiber cement, rock wool insulation at the exterior and in the interior walls, zip sheathing. And then they're also, like I said, trying to achieve net zero using ductless mini splits within the house. They're going to do radiant heat flooring. They already have in place in the existing house a Rheem hybrid water heater, and they're looking to have a Tesla Powerwall, and they have a Tesla. They want to have a charging station for the car. And then one of the main concepts of the house is to have this light well that kind of brings light throughout the entire house. So like I mentioned, this is an existing, it's a tiny little house. I think it's like the footprint's like maybe 800 square feet. And it's only one floor, and it has a basement. We're pretty much taking everything apart and using some of the existing structure and adding a second story so that they have more living space and more porch space, so they're trying to create spaces within the house so that they, on this little itty bitty footprint, have space to entertain and have family come stay by the beach for the summertime and things like that. This is just kind of a 2D rendering of what the house is going to hopefully look like. But like I said, the house has been designed and talked about ad nauseum with the clients, but still hasn't gone through any of the approval processes with the town. So although they have good intentions of how they want to build the house and what they want the house to be and how they want it to be sustainable and they want it to be net zero, we still don't even know if this design is going to be allowed because it's on an extremely undersized lot, and it pretty much has at least 6 variances that it has to get approved. So so that's what I'm working with right now. Stop sharing. Oh, there we go.
Okay, getting
Rob, you wanna-
Yeah. Go ahead, Rob.
Hi. Thanks. I'm gonna try and share my screen as well. That was really interesting, Marissa. So if I hopefully you can you see that? It's just my Finder window. Hopefully,
See it?
Yes,
does that open up when I click on it? Sorry.
yes.
Yeah, okay. So I think exactly like Marissa, I've had kind of varying kind of levels of client interest in terms of sustainable design. So what I thought I'd just flash up, I don't know how much it's on the news in the States, but there's been, it's pretty much 24 hours here, talk about the COP26 Conference of the Parties and kind of trying to get limit to 1.5 degrees of kind of heating up of the earth by the end of the century. And just as a kind of might be interest to people in the UK, but might be interest to American architects as well. The UK architects have produced this practice guide for declaring a climate and biodiversity emergency, and there's some really interesting stuff in here for small practices as well as big practices. I just thought I'd just pick out a couple of things from it. It's just to kind of highlight why we should probably be thinking about sustainability a little bit more seriously than we are in our projects. So the kind of point made here is that building materials and construction and building operations account for pretty much 40% of all carbon emissions. So clearly what we're doing as sort of smaller practitioners isn't the kind of is a small element of that, but still a significant element of that kind of net carbon generation. And you can see in terms of just picking out the sort of killer facts here, if we carry on the current consumption levels, we need 1.6 planets to kind of keep going with what we've got to do. So I think in terms of construction, we've definitely got to change the way we're working. And in terms of architects, we're pretty well placed to be able to do that. So in terms of what our practice typically generates in terms of carbon generation, this infographic shows is pretty small, but in terms of one large project that a practice can work on, it can be kind of quite significant in terms of carbon that's within that project from the start, and also operational carbon as you go through. So this kind of document's quite useful in terms of looking at how we can change kind of our practice ourselves. So personal impacts here, average global footprint globally, everyone produces 4.8 tons, but in the UK it's 12.7 tons. I'm sure in the US there's potentially even more. So there's kind of significant way to go. And the last infographic I just want to pull out of here was really, well, there's 2 more in terms of what does sustainable design mean. Conventional practice here is kind of just achieving building regulations, kind of minimum standards. Green building, sustainable design can kind of get towards a net zero element of design, which I think what Marissa was talking about. And then if everyone was doing that, would be okay, but clearly there's a lot of legacy issues. So we really need to be kind of shooting beyond that in order to kind of get back to a net zero carbon world. And then finally, I think it's a little bit further on here. There's a graphic about, here we go. So In the UK, just to set the context for the UK, we've got 28 million energy inefficient existing homes in the UK, and we're looking, a lot of our targets are towards net zero carbon by 2050, and 80% of the buildings we'll have in 2050 have already been built. And if you think at the moment we're still building buildings that won't be net zero when they're completed, so that's going to obviously increase now. So there's some pretty stark statistics about why we should be considering doing slightly more sustainable designs, or much more sustainable designs, really. So I thought I'd look at the question through the lens of 2 projects I've worked on. So the first project, so Project A for a client, was a bungalow on a site. It's a relatively large site, and that's what it was. Now, there's a lot of discussion in the UK at the moment about whether we should be knocking any buildings down, and there's certain people who have the view that you shouldn't knock any buildings down and you should refurbish all buildings, because the carbon that's inherent in them is so big that it's kind of a bad thing to do. But when you've got such a big plot, such a small building, and it's also very poorly performing, single glazed windows, no real thermal insulation, the view was that it needs to go. So in terms of little local environment, something that we have to do is kind of ecological surveys. So this was a bat survey, just to go in and just prove that in the existing building, before we knock it down, there's no bats in there. And we'd do various arboricultural surveys and check out what trees are on the site, and obviously not build within the root protection areas of those trees. That generates the constraints. So the brief for this building, you can see the clients were quite keen on sustainable features, but they kind of jumped straight to, within this first brief that they sent over, energy positive, great, that's a kind of an aim. Tesla roof, Tesla Powerwall. So these are kind of solutions that we haven't really designed the building yet. Are these appropriate? Don't know. We don't know yet, but they kind of definitely wanted it. So there's kind of that balance of trying to make sure that clients go through the process of actually designing before you kind of jump to conclusions, I think, on what to include within a building. So the concept for this building was really a combination of a barn element. It sits within a very rural landscape, and a pavilion element because it sits facing a very large meadow, and the idea of that kind of almost like, to use a UK US kind of analogy, maybe a kind of a simple English barn and a kind of Farnsworth house, American, very modern kind of element to it. So the pitch that we ran through kind of reinterpreted the brief, and as part of that, the environmental elements, a sustainable house, mostly off-grid, energy positive, Tesla roof and Powerwall, smart home, not overfitted, so it's difficult to maintain. These were the kind of precedents that the client gave us, what they wanted. This was kind of some ideas of kind of the spaces that they wanted, and then just ran through the context and kind of constraints on the site, and looking from a very early stage in terms of kind of sun path and how the building is going to be orientated to make best use of passive solar gain, reduce kind of windows to the north side, and so on. So the initial ideas, that was that concept idea that we looked at, and then kind of arranging the spaces around a sort of a courtyard element. So that's very, very kind of basic initial design concept. Generates a model, and then a planning application. So this was kind of the site plan for that design, and then in architectural terms, that's the intent and what it was going to look like. But in technical terms, how do you kind of achieve that? So this is a summary sheet that we do for pretty much all of our projects, just so the contractor who's taking it on board kind of gets an overview of the whole thing. You see here, in terms of the U values, 0.1 watts per meter squared per degree Kelvin for all the walls, roof and floor. That's pretty good. 0.8 for glazing. You can only achieve that with triple glazed, and the air tightness 2 meters cubed. That's kind of way beyond what the building regulations are at the moment. So they're the kind of the key metrics for the thermal performance of this building. In terms of materials, they wanted to use local materials, so we're using sort of flint and oak, which are English oak, which are kind of sourced close to the site, so they're keen on that. They wanted a basement, so there's kind of various issues with a lot of concrete going into the ground, but that was kind of key. And then building services, as Marissa was saying, energy recovery via what we call MVHR, which is mechanical ventilation heat recovery system, and then solar panels and power walls. And I was just going to flick through kind of the process of briefing for that sustainability. So we worked with a company called Max Fordham, and they shared this kind of residential sustainability matrix with the client. And we went to a meeting with the client, with Max Fordham, and kind of went through that this is minimum standard for all these issues. So there's energy targets, there's running costs, health and well-being, so various different categories. This is the minimum standard that you need to achieve according to the government. This is best practice at the moment. This is innovative, and this is really pioneering, super kind of off the scale kind of stuff. Where do you want to sit? And kind of for each of these categories, there's a cost obviously associated with it. There's a time, there's availability for people having the skills at this kind of end of the scale. So kind of went through that with the client, kind of set these bars of where we want, what we wanted to achieve, and what kind of defining what success looks like with the project. And it went through beyond kind of energy to nature, water, materials and waste, community kind of stuff. So that sustainability matrix they use for all their projects, large and small, and kind of generated a brief where they had, do you have any kind of each one a question, an assumption that they've made, and then the client response. So that was kind of the briefing process, and that led to this kind of design report where the building kind of went through that briefing process, and then kind of did some daylight analysis. Are we getting light in at the right point? Do we need to make some of the windows smaller for instance where the kind of the red patches are, it's kind of overheating? Do we need to add a window where there's the darker blue patches? So kind of the idea being that we can really kind of work with engineers to optimize the design before it goes into planning, before we kind of commit to too much. And then these diagrams kind of showed the process that we should be doing in terms of where to start. So being lean is better than just using renewable energy to offset kind of not reducing losses in the first place. So what does that mean? What does that theory mean in practice? So being lean means being super well insulated, avoiding thermal bridges, gaining as much free energy as you can from the sun. And then that varies obviously between the winter and then the summer, minimizing overheating and ensuring you've got decent thermal mass for the building. Being clean in terms of use of MVHR, using low energy lighting, technology to use water more efficiently, technology to heat from the ground using ground source heat pumps, and so on. So these are the kind of ideas that we're looking at, and then potentially sort of in terms of being energy positive, effective use of renewables, say PVs, using green roofs, car charging, as you're saying with the sort of Teslas, and then energy positive. This was really interesting actually. It's kind of what are the biggest things we can do to save energy at the best value. So some of these are going to cost loads of money and make a small difference. Some of them are going to be relatively cheap and make a big difference. The biggest one being don't tumble dry clothes. If you just hang them outside, you make a massive gain of kind of energy for the house. Or taking shorter showers makes a massive difference to the house. Probably those two things more than increasing the insulation by another kind of 50 millimeters or whatever. And then all of that was kind of run through I don't know whether anyone's heard of Passive House, but a Passive House planning package, which is kind of a German system for analysing the building physics of a house. So although they didn't want to do a certified passive house and they wanted lots of glazing to look at the meadow and so on, they were kind of using that as a toolkit to optimize the design. And it kind of gave us these new values that then as an architect had to sort of design too. So that's kind of an overall kind of initial design for the mechanical ventilation and kind of building services. In terms of how practice has changed, this was one of our Zoom calls, looking at threading the MVHR system through the house, how we're going to get the ductworks everywhere. This is the main contractor with his head in his hands because he doesn't know how it's going to work, and the M&E engineer and myself. So that was kind of partly how the project evolved through the lockdowns. In terms of the structure, being sustainable, we used a lot of SIPS panels, structurally insulated panels. So there's insulation between two layers of, in effect, OSB board. And that means that you really minimize thermal bridges through the envelope. Now, there were some big spans we were doing, so we needed to use some steel, which has got a carbon impact of its own, but largely the building's a structural insulated panel system that sits on a kind of a concrete box for the basement. So, and then out of the main consultants, I just sort of quickly flick through landscape. So this is really important in terms of looking at hard finishes, local materials again, local planting, so planting that's appropriate for where we are in Hampshire, planting that's going to contribute to foraging for birds, foraging for insects, bats as well, so kind of idea there. Using native species generally, fruiting species, and then there's a very keen to kind of reinstate natural hedgerows, which with kind of industrial farming, there's been a lot of kind of hedgerow loss. So in terms of ecology and biodiversity, a lot of consideration in that in terms of the local environment that they're going to do, right down to sort of the lighting, really minimizing external lighting to allow for bat foraging close by in the meadow, and owls and so on locally. And then managing water in terms of a green roof, reducing runoff, and then permeable surfaces for water to drain away. So I've just sort of flicked to a few in construction. So what does that mean? This is the steel frame up on the site. A view from above, you see the steel frame that's then partially supporting the SIPS panels, SIPS roof. So a lot of that is to do with kind of getting the maximum insulation you can and also minimizing thermal bridging. Some of the steel did go through from inside to outside. So this is a balcony looking over the meadow, and you can see where we've got steels running through, just considering thermal breaks between to kind of minimize any thermal bridging between the structure. And then a lot of it is about ensuring that the building's airtight. So I think the biggest change in construction I've seen really is kind of all of these airtight membranes all taped around any penetrations to really, there's a catchphrase in the UK of build it tight and ventilate right. So really stopping any kind of air going through the fabric, and then making sure that all of that goes through your ventilation and all the heat's recovered from that to reuse. Now, this kind of gets to the nub of it, in that we've gone through all of this process really with this client, but there's things that we wanted to do. So this room could probably be perfectly well lit by a single window. We wanted to do something fun, so we've got a whole load of windows here. Each window's 8 times poorer performing than the wall alongside, so it's a bit like having loads and loads of holes through the fabric, but that's one of the compromises we wanted to make with the architecture, and it's something that the client wanted. And then on the roof, so you can see the difference between these slates here and these slates. So all of these slates are natural slates, all of these slates are PV panels, and again, it would be probably a higher performing PV panel if it was an actual panel on the surface. These lose some of the efficiency, but from an aesthetic point of view, they especially when you stand back, they're a pretty good match to the slates, and you don't really see them. And then in terms of the ground source heat pump, it uses boreholes to take the heat from below the ground. This is borehole machine kind of going, and you can see the kind of the mess that the construction has made of the meadow as a whole. So there's kind of, you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs for some of this stuff, and all of that will go back as a wildflower kind of meadow. But the construction process itself can be fairly unforgiving to get to where you want to go.
Rob, just quickly, we're coming. Time is pressing a little bit.
Yeah.
Just on the conversation with the client about, this kind of highly asked. I mean, it's not a huge house, is it? It's what, maybe 2,500 square foot, something like that.
So it's
How big is
4,100.
Say that again.
385 square meters.
Yeah. So kind of 4,000 square foot. Okay. So, but even so, it's not, huge by any means, but the conversation you had with the client about what it's going to take, them before they even put a hole in the ground to achieve this level of building, all the consultants that you brought on board to make it happen and make it viable. How did that go? Just kind of briefly.
So right from the start, they said, well, we probably should have a passive house building, but we want loads of glass at the back to be able to see over the meadow. So there's already a kind of a compromise there. And these are, I would say, sustainably very enlightened clients, but there's already a kind of a willingness that there will need to be compromises made, and we're not going to go all out for a kind of very small windows, super thick walls box that's super efficient kind of fabric. So they wanted to do something interesting, and I think as an architect that's great because you get to do kind of fun stuff. Is that the right thing to do going forwards? Potentially. There's kind of there's certainly more efficient ways of doing it, but on the flip side, they have put their money where their mouth is in terms of, at the end of the day, this will be an energy positive house. So it's hard to kind of argue with it, really, I think. And albeit
it's more the commitment
resource.
it's more the ability to, it's that discussion about, you want to do this, and here, before we do anything, we need all these consultants to justify the scheme for you. It's it's that one where you're bringing all these other before, so you even get potentially even get your permission.
So that is a tricky conversation. I think the way I phrase that a lot is that the money that you spend on which is a lot, but in the scheme of kind of building a house, it isn't. So say 1%, 2% that you spend on kind of an energy consultant, your payback over the lifetime of that house. Yeah. Okay, if you're developing it, maybe you're not going to live there, but these guys are very keen to kind of live there permanently. Your payback will be massive on that. So in terms of just optimizing what size heat pump you want, okay, maybe if you didn't have that, you might oversize it. You kind of, all of these little factors kind of go into ensuring that exactly what is designed will work, number one, and isn't kind of overdone. So I think the investment in consultants for some clients who have the ability to do that is money well spent.
Good.
Bob, when you started the project, did you have an initial charrette with all of the contractors and subcontractors all together to kind of get them on board as a team?
So when I started the project, it was just me, and I kind of pitched. They wanted a very sustainable house. Clearly, I pitched a couple of consultants that I thought we should use, because as an architect, I'm definitely not qualified to kind of bring that level of sustainable design. And they actually went. There were kind of a couple of price points to those guys, and they went with the ones that were the most expensive because they really wanted to buy into that. So they saw the value in that from an early day. In terms of charrettes, we had design team meetings with those guys going through the design process. The main kind of time where we first met with the main contractor, it was very much, look guys, this isn't a normal house that you can kind of throw up. This is something that you've got to take. And that we were very clear through the tender process. This is going to be super airtight. There's going to be multiple air tests on it. You've got to achieve all of these factors. Can you do it? And how are you going to manage that when you do it? And so, fortunately, we found some guys who were really keen to kind of do it. And I think it's an upskilling process for constructors as much as architects, I think, in terms of the direction of travel of where we need to go with this stuff.
Yeah, some amazing projects, and there's amazing stuff happening on both sides of the Atlantic. Stacy, do we have any questions?
No.
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 Okay. All right. Now, Scott, you want to? We had a couple of other questions that we thought we might get to. Do you want to try that?
Well, I didn't know if Marissa, do you want to just pitch in just at the end of Rob's, any comments on that particularly?
Yes. So it is a lot of process. Like I feel with my project, a lot of it was the client putting the cart before the horse, because they know what they want. They want to incorporate all these sustainable practices into the house, but you know, they don't know if they can actually achieve it because of the town's restrictions. And then a lot of the thing was they would get into nitty-gritty details. They would send me, oh, hey, we want to use this specific thing in our house. I would say, well, you know, we're not there yet. We're not at that level of design yet. And I've, you know, brought in consultants for this project. But again, a lot of it is putting the cart before the horse, because if the town doesn't approve it, and we've gone through all this design and paid out all these consultants, and the town makes us go back to the drawing board, you know, they've spent all this money. So then the other thing that the client is doing is trying to find a builder and price out what will this project cost if we do go ahead with it, and if it does get approved. And they're having a lot of trouble finding someone locally that can do this type of construction. So they've been seeking out contractors in different, you know, as far as Philadelphia, which is like maybe about an hour and a half from here. And they're having a lot of trouble finding someone who would be willing to build it if it does go through, because they don't want just, you know, Joe Schmo contractor putting it together, because it needs to perform to a certain degree. All these different things need to come together and be airtight. And they're very concerned about those types of things. So yeah, it's interesting. The whole process is great.
We've got in the UK through the planning process, there's certain things that you can do without permission, which are called permitted development. So it'd be interesting to know whether you think, for people who are trying to super insulate their homes or kind of reduce their energy footprint, whether there should almost be a pass through the planning system that means,
Exactly.
hey,
And so like what's interesting is like we have a planner on board for this project, and we have a, you know, a civil engineer on board for this project, and we've had multiple discussions about what would we say to the zoning board when we go to present. And you know, they kind of feel that the planner isn't really on their side. Excuse me, because the planner's being realistic and saying, hey, the town isn't going to let you do this because you're adding you're adding a second story porch. It's not loud, all this stuff. So it's, sorry, I'm losing my voice. Keep going.
Interesting. Because in the national planning policy framework here, there's a presumption to, and it's seen as a very positive thing to have energy efficiency built into your scheme. So in your case, Marissa, if it was here, it may be that if it was being built in a sensitive area, we don't have our invisible boxes here within which you can just do anything. But they might say, well, actually, there's a balance to be had between allowing what you're trying to do, because it's much more green, energy efficient, carbon neutral, etc., against maybe the detriment of putting a slightly bigger building than we would normally allow in that particular place. So
that's a good argument. I mean, I practice community planning as well as architecture, and that's exactly what I would do. I would say that there are special reasons for the granting of these variances, because the proposed structure, and of course, when you do that, you're committing to a highly efficient, energy efficient structure, that these variances should be granted because we are going above and beyond. And that's a legitimate special reason that your planner should be building a case on for the granting of these variances.
I know. Yeah. It's interesting. The whole project is interesting. We'll see if it even goes through. So,
But the other thing is that it's not only exceptional if you were to consider that a building is exceptional not only because it ticks a lot of boxes for being energy efficient and etc., but in that design, say that building that's slightly bigger than one would normally allow, is it not only energy efficient, but is it also a much better building overall? And there are other policies here in this country to allow houses to be built in certain areas, for instance, on green fields in the countryside, where you have to meet many additional criteria to show that the proposal is more than exceptional.
I have a question from our audience. It appears that many panelists have practices that aren't very old. I would appreciate hearing stories of finding clients, particularly transitioning from taking projects to survive to selecting projects that better align with your personal ethos.
Okay, here's the thing. We have about 3 minutes left. I need a couple minutes at the end. But this is good because Scott and I were hoping that this would lead to future panels. And that topic was one of the questions that we had on our list of extended questions. So I would suggest that if our panelists are open to it, that maybe we could do another one of these discussions, maybe in 3 months or 6 months from now, and kind of pick up where we're leaving off now. So we do appreciate the question, but we are going to need to wrap this up now. And Scott, do you have any comments?
No, just on that question, be flexible. I think you need to choose your opportunities, and you got to be flexible and be visible and reach out to your potential client base. All
right. Well, we're going to allow you to expand on that in about 3 months. Hopefully, we can do that. All right. So I'm going to conclude the discussion now. First thing I want to do is I was asked by our AIA New Jersey president to do a little promo for our 2021 Design Day, which is a virtual event. It's actually tomorrow night, and you can still sign up for it. But the guest speakers are Michael Manfredi and Marion Weiss of Weiss Manfredi. So it should be a very interesting Design Day discussion, and there will be presentations of design awards from AIA New Jersey. So I have now satisfied that request from our AIA New Jersey president. And as we conclude, I would like to take the remaining time, we have about a minute and a half, to thank everyone, our attendees and our panelists, for participating in this program and comparing and discovering the commonalities in practice in the United States and the UK, as well as some of the differences. I thought the questions and the answers actually outlined that fairly well. So I would like to also thank Rob Jackson, RIBA, Natalie Skeet, RIBA from the UK side, Kim Bunn, AIA, Marissa Iamello from the United States, and special thanks to my co-moderator, Scott Masker, RIBA, who I've known for many decades now. And I also want to take the time in the concluding moments to thank Stacy Cleash, AIA. Stacy is our AIA New Jersey advocacy consultant, and she helps us with helps AIA New Jersey to coordinate programs and events such as this. And I also want to take a few seconds and thank John Politsky and Alicia Blackburn from We Speak Easy, who set up the technology for today. So we would like to do these in the future. We'll be in contact to continue the discussion with the many good questions. Thank you again, and farewell for now. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all.